International Monetary Fund, IMF, defines gross domestic product, GDP, as the monetary value of final goods and services produced in a country in a given period of time. This period of time is usually a year. There are a number of ways to measure GDP, and real GDP is often used, which is just adjusted for inflation, while gross world product, GWP, is the sum of all countries' GDP over a period of time. Now, each economy has their own currency. So America has the US dollar, UK has the pound, and Japan has the yen. So to add all the GDPs together, they must be converted. The two common ways to adjust are market prices and purchasing price parity, PPP. The different international bodies use different measures. However, the IMF generally uses PPP. Now, when we look at GDP and GWP, we don't look at the value, i.e. $100 billion, rather the change over a year. So if last year's output was $100 billion and this year it's $101 billion, then there's a 1% increase. Twice a year, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, publishes the World Economic Outlook, WEO, in April and October. Now, the report splits the economies into two groups. First, the advanced economies. They are 39 countries which account for 15% of the population. Countries such as the US, Australia, and the Euro area countries. And the second are the emerging market and developing economies. They account for 154 countries, with the remaining 85% of the population. Now, the main criteria used by the WEO to classify into the groups are per capita income levels, export diversification, so that oil exporters that have high per capita GDP would not make the advanced classification because around 70% of their exports are oil, and the degree of integration into the global financial system. When we split GWP into these two economy groupings, the output is lopsided. The 39 advanced economies, comprising 15% of the world's population, produce a staggering 42% of gross world product. Most of this comes from the US, 16%, and the Euro area, 12%. While the other 154 emerging market and developing economies comprise 85% of the world's population, produce 58% of world GWP. The majority of this coming from China at 18% and India at 7%. Now, this graph shows a change in GWP since the 1980s into the three categories. We have our emerging market and developing economies in red. We have the advanced economies in aqua, and we have the combined world is in orange. Now, if the graph falls below 0%, it means the economy produced less compared to the previous year. It can be seen that in 2009, the advanced economies contracted by 3%, while the emerging economies grew, though at a reduced rate to the previous year, at 3%, giving a total growth in 2009 of 0%. While, in 2017, growth across the advanced economies and emerging economies is slowly increasing, with the emerging economies at 4.5%, advanced at 2.2%, and the world at 3.6%. This shows that GWP is growing because of the emerging markets and developing economies, not the advanced economies. To conclude, gross world product, or GWP, is the sum of all countries' GDP over a period of time, usually a year. The 39 advanced economies, comprising 15% of the world's population, produce 42% of GWP. The 154 emerging market developing economies, comprising 85% of the world's population, produce 58% of GWP. However, the growth in GWP since 2000 has predominantly been from the emerging market and developing economies.